It's been eternal torment.
57-year-old Lionel Dahmer, a research chemist, has confronted some of the most painful questions any parent could ever ask. In a haunting book called A Father's Story, he looks for the origins of his son's madness, and one of the first places he looks is in the mirror.
As I began to confront Jeff's childhood imaginings, it became clear to me that they had not always been wholly different from my own. These same needs and impulses had lived a shadowy half-life in me.
When you were a teenager, you had dreams of committing murder yourself.
Almost always after I was either physically or in some other way harassed by bullies, I would wake up, say, the next morning, and I would have this feeling that I had hurt someone, that I had maybe hurt them badly, that I had killed them.
Lionel Dahmer also reveals that as a teenager, struggling with feelings of inferiority, he had his own destructive obsessions with fire and homemade bombs.
And this was your way of what? Achieving some control? Gaining some respect?
I felt like I was in control and I had some power. I was noticed.
You seem to believe that you may have passed on some kind of genetic propensity for obsession or destructive behavior.
It's something to be considered. I mean, I want to consider everything.
A series of childhood infections, a hernia operation that seemed to traumatize Jeffrey when he was 4. At about that same time, something else happened. Lionel had removed some dead animals from the crawl space beneath their house and placed the bones in a bucket.
I noticed that Jeff had picked up these bones and just let them drop back down into the bucket and made a clanging noise. And he seemed sort of entranced by that. He just said, as he dropped them down, it's just like fiddlesticks, he says.
Looking back on it now, Lionel says he can't help wondering if there was more to it than just child's play.
I can no longer distinguish the ordinary from the forbidding, trivial events from ones loaded with foreboding. When he was 4 and pointed to his belly button and asked what would happen if someone cut it out, was that merely an ordinary question from a child who had begun to explore his own body? Or was it a sign of something morbid already growing in his mind? When we went fishing, and he seemed captivated by the gutted fish, staring intently at the brightly colored entrails, was that a child's natural curiosity, or was it a harbinger of the horror that was later to be found in apartment 213?
What was he like as a young boy?
Wonderful. I thought he was wonderful.
Jeffrey's mother, Joyce.
He was fun. We did all of the normal things that people do. If I'd seen something that had been a clue of any kind, I'd like to think that I would have done something about it immediately. No, there wasn't anything unusual about Jeff.
But according to Lionel, by the time Jeffrey entered this elementary school in Doylestown, Ohio, he was no longer the buoyant child his parents once knew.
Jeff's first grade teacher described him as inordinately shy, said that he stayed away from all the kids out here on the playground and seemed to be profoundly unhappy. Shouldn't that have set off some kind of alarm?
We visited the teacher, and we became very concerned, as she did. But I thought it was just shyness, as I had gone through when I was a youngster in school.
But what for you had been shyness, for him was becoming near total isolation.
That's right. In retrospect, that's very true.
As Jeffrey entered adolescence, he became even more withdrawn. Lionel and Joyce were fighting, at times so violently, he says knives were drawn. Their strained marriage was beginning to crack.
There were times when he heard the shouting and he went outside and just left the house. I learned later that he was slapping the trees with branches and sticks, and I guess apparently out of frustration.
When you think back on those times, the arguments and the possible effect, does it cause you anguish?
It makes me sick. It really makes me sick that we didn't have a more Ozzie and Harriet type family. And I'll feel that way to my death.
In his endless second-guessing about the upbringing of his child, there is one last agonizing possibility that haunts Lionel Dahmer. That the drugs he says were prescribed for his wife when she was pregnant with Jeffrey might have harmed him. Lionel remembers a very difficult pregnancy.
Her jaw would go sideways and lock, and her eyes would bulge. And I know it sort of sounds like epilepsy.
It does sound like a seizure
of
some kind.
right. But it was not diagnosed as that. The doctor did not say that that's what it was. He did not know what it was. A doctor would usually have to intervene, giving Joyce injections of barbiturates and morphine, which would finally relax her.
While current medical literature says barbiturates taken during pregnancy can cause fetal damage, at Jeffrey's trial, experts said it was impossible to link his criminal behavior to the prescription drugs his mother may have taken during her pregnancy. And tests showed no brain or genetic abnormalities. When we asked Joyce about her pregnancy, she disputed much of what Lionel said had happened and told us she doesn't know why he continues to raise questions about it, unless it's to blame her.
There were no seizures. I can't imagine where that comes from. It isn't true. I don't...
You don't recall anything like that?
No.
Seizures or
No.
seizure-like episodes?
Absolutely not.
Is it possible you just don't remember them, Joyce?
No, it's not possible. I don't remember them. It was my first pregnancy. I remember everything about my first pregnancy.
Were you prescribed medications, including morphine, barbiturates?
I don't know what medications were prescribed, and I had a doctor, a physician. I took the medicine that was prescribed for me, and for the most part I was healthy. There was nothing that was out of the ordinary as far as my pregnancy was concerned, except that...
In the end, she, like Lionel, has no answers, only questions.
Jeff was raised with all the love and care and concern that any child could be raised with, and what happened to him, I don't know. I wish I knew. I'd give anything to know. I asked the universe, why would this be allowed to happen? I don't have an answer for that.
You don't have any answers, do you?
No. No, I don't.
What do you see when you look at Jeff's face?
I guess the parent, naive parent in me still says I see an innocent, shy child, a defenseless, vulnerable child who I wish I could help now.
Time to go, Jeff.
Every month, Lionel Dahmer, along with his second wife Sherry, makes the 11-hour drive from their home in Ohio to the Wisconsin prison where his son will spend the rest of his life.
Except for the guard towers, you wouldn't really see right away that it is a prison.
Though father and son have spent many hours together during these regular visits at the prison, incredibly, they've never talked about the horrific crimes that have made the name Dahmer so infamous. They've never talked about Jeffrey's childhood, or the many questions Lionel has had about why Jeffrey did what he did, until now.